Thank you, Nick. What I plan to talk about is Wordsworth's greatest poem, the autobiographical poem, The Prelude. It's a project that, I had hoped to share this with Professor Stephen Gill of Oxford. Sadly, Stephen, for family reasons, can't be with us today. The other collaborator in this project is Dr. Sally Bushell of Lancaster University. And it's to look at how we tell the story of The Prelude through its manuscripts in a diagrammatic form. It's something perhaps many of us have tried to do with poems, with manuscripts, but this was our effort, our attempt, with thanks for designation funding, to meet for a couple of days and then to think how we might take it forward. So our purpose is to create a brief for a data visualization artist to turn into something itself creative that will tell the story we've mapped out in a linear fashion. It may be that the story is best told in this way and that a graphic artist will be best, but if as you're looking at what we come to see, you can think of a way of another artist, and there are plenty in front here who might have ideas for that, we'd be very pleased to think of telling it in a different way. The space we would use is the lower rotunda, the bottom of the tower, as it were, that you come in by. And I'm very conscious, as I show what I'm going to show, that in the Yeats exhibition in Dublin, there's a very effective telling the story of poems coming in out of editions there. So it's kind of along those ideas. It's a story that can only be told using manuscripts. So the question that we started with, if you like, what don't we know? What wouldn't we know if we didn't have the manuscripts? Well, we couldn't tell this story at all. The Wordsworth Trust has got all 23 surviving manuscripts of a poem covering, as we've, of course, discovered, over a 60-year period. So who better to tell it, and where better to tell it? True to the essence of our thinking, it's not just the story of the textual changes that we wish to tell, but the human story that's essential to understanding its development. The manuscripts tell of the many people involved: Wordsworth, his sister, his wife, his clerk John Carter, his daughter's friend, and also Coleridge, all involved in the ideas, the inspiration, and production of what became a 9,000-line poem. The poem was published posthumously within 3 months of Wordsworth's death. The last manuscript reveals that even the copy presented for the printer didn't yet have a title. The manuscript revealed that the purpose, structure, and content of the poem evolved over time. They show how different events in Wordsworth's life and the wider world demanded his return to it at different times in his life, and how lines came and went as the versions changed, and how poems published in his lifetime were, in fact, extracts from the greater poem. Above all, we wanted the story to be told in a way that draws people to the material evidence. And the word that we used is, could you pull the screen back? Was this one. We wanted people to notice. We wanted people to look for the clues themselves, obviously encouraged, pointed by ourselves, but we wanted people to see how the manuscripts told the story. So back to the less words from us and more words on the original object. How do you tell the story? Do you start at the beginning, watch how it evolves? Do you start at the end and kind of reveal its history? Well, we decided to tell it backwards, though we kept changing our minds as we were going through a bit. And we thought, well, what if we met somebody in the lane who'd left the display, and we said, have you seen that display? What did you get from it? Well, we thought we would like them to tell us this, that the long-lived poet spent over 40 years on a poem in which he continually reassessed and tried to come to terms with the formative years of his life. And it was a process that involved the family household, yet at the time of publication, only his wife was left to fully appreciate the moment. So, if I could draw in the assistance of my colleagues at this point, how do you map out this story? Nothing high-tech about this, I can promise you. Right, so if one of you would be good enough to hold one end, it's going to get heavy, so the strongest one at this end. And then I've got to be able to see this as well. Okay, so I'm going to come round the left of you, Jane. It's totally unrehearsed and bound to go wrong. Okay. This is costing valuable seconds. Could you lift that out? Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry about this. Okay, so we started off with 3 introductions. We hadn't yet, I suppose, decided on our target audience, but we thought these could be adapted. The first one, great poems don't just happen. This, for many of our visitors, is a surprise. For many university students coming here, this is a surprise. Great poems don't just happen. Poetry is hard-fought, exhausting process of creation and revision. Next one, many hands make light work. The fact that that the whole family was involved, as the people I've just mentioned. And then the third one we thought was, well, the prelude is a poem. What is it? We have to at least introduce that to visitors who perhaps don't know it. So working backwards, thank you, Helena. We took the 1850 text. So the red boxes as we go through are key moments. They follow a kind of line. And as you'll see, that not every manuscript follows a progression. In fact, I hope I get some injury time added to the end of this if we can do that. As I trip over the wire and get injured. Thank you very much. Actually, this is a bit of a performance piece, Tony. I hope you're approving of this. So the first one that we would show in this line is the printed book, 1850 printed book. There it is. And as you can see, the title of the talk comes from the title of the book, Growth of a Poet's Mind, as in this case, Growth of a Poet's Poem. And the one that we would use would be the inscribed copy from Mary Wordsworth to John Cowton, the clerk. And these are the only two people out of the whole process who were, if you like, alive and well enough to appreciate that this was the outcome of all these years' work. So if we work backwards, you'll see that there are several parallel lines running with this. On the top line is a chronology, if you like, sometimes with world events. Below that, there are events in the Wordsworth's lives that had an impact on this. Then you've got the direct line of authorial revision. And then below that, you've got manuscripts that were companions to it. And then at the very bottom, in the yellow, we've got manuscripts that, if you like, add a context. So if we keep going back, 1839, here we have the last. This is the state of the poem fit for publication. All right, just hang on. Is it heavy? Elle, could you come and give a sort of weighty hand at this end? So I don't know whether you can see that, but this is something that we would like people to notice. This is the manuscript that was to go to the printers. It was the one, if you like, that Wordsworth put the poem to bed in. But if you look at it, it still says, title not yet fixed upon. So what would our visitors make of that? Was Wordsworth leaving it to other people to come up with a title, which is in fact what happened? Or how did he expect it ever to have a title? Would you like me to speed up, you two? You probably would. Okay. So we're back to 1832. You'll see that the black line down the middle tells the story that after 1832 this became a 14-book poem rather than a 13-book poem. Actually, if you just keep rolling and I'll blather on as we go along. So we've got back to 18... I'm just going to put my script down. There's just no point. I hope you're getting the idea anyway. It becomes a 14-book poem. And then before that, 1832, where are we there? Just where that black line is, Wordsworth returns to the poem. It's the Great Reform Act. He thinks back to having seen Burke talk in his younger days, and he thinks Burke is now the man to save the country from revolution, if you like, but Burke's inspiration. And so in 1832, national events determine that Wordsworth adds an extra section. So that's there. If we come back to 1819, John Carter, let's leave the climax a bit covered up. We should. You're right. Yeah. So 1819, John Carter, Wordsworth's clerk, produces a smart copy. We don't really know why. John Carter copies it out, and then partway through the poem, Wordsworth takes an interest in it. This, by the way, is the third time that this 9,000-line poem has been fully copied out. And we don't know why, but what we want people to notice, and only those in the front row can notice, is that there are pencil annotations here, Wordsworth's revisions, that have been later rubbed out. So why that? Why we would want the visitor to notice that? Is it because it is a smart copy and that Wordsworth didn't do his usual thing of writing all over it? And that, for example, is the Sorry, wrong way. That is the copy that followed. That is Wordsworth typically at work with a pen in hand and making major changes. So perhaps, is it because of the smart copy he used pencil that was later erased? How many? 3. Okay. Well, I think people get. I hope you get the idea. We get back to 1805. You can see in 1805 there's a line goes off to the top to the yellow to show that there were lines from that later appeared in The Friend. Come back to the next red one, 1804. Wordsworth preparing a manuscript, having discussed the poem with Coleridge. There's weeks of very intense activity. It's going to be a 5-book version of the poem, and then he changes it to 13. And you can see that between there and there, many other manuscripts come into play. If there's a dotted line, it means there's a manuscript that once existed which has now been lost. So that's to kind of partly tell that story. If you keep going, Al, if you would. Thank you. No, you're doing good. So we get back to 1799, and this is going back to the glass sculpture. Wordsworth is in Goslar. Wordsworth is in Goslar. He's thinking about life in his childhood. He writes about the River Derwent that we've just been hearing about. You can see that an episode here about the hooting of the owls, mimicking the owls at Windermere, it gets written as part of these recollections. It doesn't go into the 1799 version of the poem. Instead of that, it goes to Lyrical Ballads, published in 1800, and it then, from Lyrical Ballads, ends up in the poem of 1805. So what we're trying to show is that there isn't, if you like, kind of a natural progression, that there wasn't an idea from the start that there was going to be a 13-book prelude or even a prelude, but these various drafts formed versions that got larger and larger, changed through his life, affected by his own circumstances, but also by national events. And if we go back just one step further, this is the end, I promise. There are even events that were written shortly, well, not so long after they actually happened. Lines drafted about Wordsworth stealing the boat at Ullswater, about the death of his father, which themselves feed into the Germany moment. So it kind of shows that Wordsworth was already thinking about recollecting his childhood even before the famous moment in Goslar in 1798. Boy, that was exhausting. Right. Thank you. So if you do have any thoughts about how we turn a two-dimensional linear progression into something else, do let us know. But if nothing else, we'll be able to sort of tell that in a more beautiful form in the Rotunda, just to tell the story of how a poem progressed. Thank you very much.